the clauses in the Palestinian National Charter that referred to Israel's destruction. And we feel that we have done enough in this regard. It is a Palestinian state that needs to be recognized by the state of Israel and not the opposite. Thank you.
I will just briefly address the question of how the destruction of Gaza's economy will contribute or not contribute to a resolution of this conflict. Perhaps one way to start is to just give you some facts and figures. Gaza's economy has been very consciously and very deliberately attacked and dismembered. And it's important to remember that prior to the siege, and certainly prior to Israel's 2008 attack, there has been a longstanding policy of deliberately undermining and weakening the economic structure of Gaza and the West Bank in order to preclude the emergence of a viable economic infrastructure which could then be the basis or form the basis of a political state. This has been the imperative, the goal, the objective from the beginning of the occupation. This is something that's been articulated to me many, many times, sometimes very bluntly, very directly, and sometimes not so bluntly by a range of Israeli officials. Now, before the attack in 2008, for example, between 2005 and 2008, due to Israeli restrictions, closures, blockades, the number, this is one of many statistics, but it's a telling one, the number of operating factories, and this is a World Bank figure, the number of operating factories in Gaza declined in that 2.5 year period from 3,900 to 23. Between 100,000 and 120,000 people in the private sector lost their jobs. This is prior to the attack as a result of the siege. The siege basically has destroyed any kind of normal trade between Gaza and Israel and its traditional trading partners. You have in Israel a per capita GDP of $35,000. In the West Bank, you have a per capita GDP of $1,600, itself a decline from about 2,200 years ago. And in Gaza, you have a per capita GDP of $800, a figure that I believe General Allen referred to as one of the lowest in the region in his talk. You have in Gaza a very, very young population. Approximately 74% of the population is 30 years of age and younger, and almost 51% of the population, over 50%, is 18 years of age and younger. You have an unemployment rate now which has approached, on average, 40% for Gazans. And if you break it down by regions, it's higher, much higher in certain regions. However, for young Gazan males between 20 and 24, the unemployment rate is 67%. People are absolutely trapped. There is no freedom of movement. The borders are sealed, except for individuals who can leave under highly constrained circumstances. You have a private sector that has been virtually destroyed, and you have the once productive people of Gaza reduced to dependency on humanitarian assistance and public sector salaries, with no hope and no future. Now, what is the implication of this and many other stats that I'm not going to give you because of time? Of course, this has fueled all kinds of divisions politically within society. Young people have no hope, no possibility, nothing to do. So this fuels radicalization, fuels violence. You have various divisions within society along political and economic lines. You have growing divisions between the refugee community and the non-refugee community, between economic classes, where the asymmetries in wealth because of other issues have grown quite dramatic. So you have the very rich and the very poor. You have political divisions, not only between Fatah and Hamas, but within Hamas, splinter groups, the growing role of the very extremist Salafist groups in Gaza. They're still a minority, but they're gaining. And they're gaining adherents because children have nothing else to look forward to. And also remember that Gaza is cut off from the West Bank, and the West Bank, of course, from Gaza, not only demographically, but economically and politically. And this is a very serious problem. In my view, it is the single most serious problem confronting Palestinians and confronting a sustainable solution to the conflict. And attempts to thwart and to preclude any kind of attempt at unification between Fatah and Hamas, which our government has pursued, as well as others, I think is absolutely dangerous, very dangerous, and will consign, ultimately will consign both Palestinians and Israelis to continued conflict. And so the imperatives are many, but economic devastation can never possibly lead to any kind of positive, long-term, workable solution. Nobody in this room would want their children to have to confront the lack of options and the daily violence that occurs in Gaza, not only at the hands of internal forces, but external forces as well. The number of people in Gaza who are dependent upon aid just to survive, to meet their basic needs, are minimally 72%, and I've seen some sources go as high as 85%. This is a population where poverty was below 10% 20 years ago.
Obviously, the level of interest here is high, but in the interest of time, we're going to have to limit ourselves to one more comment. So please, Andrew, or two if they're very short.
I want to very briefly add a little antidote to what Sarah had to say, because while I agree fully with her analysis and her statistics, I want to try and counter the impression that this need be the case. Gaza is a territory that is perfectly capable of standing on its own feet. It has a successful, thriving entrepreneurial business community which, left to themselves, is able to provide employment, to be able to integrate with the region. Prior to the year 2000, Gaza was a prospering, middle-income developing country that was moving rapidly. In the past 10 years, it's been reduced to the status of a least developed country, to the standards of Chad or Niger. That's the comparison. The descent brought about by artificial reasons, by man-made reasons, nothing to do with the capabilities of the people to be able to provide employment for themselves, their territories. Gaza looks naturally towards Israel and to the West Bank. It doesn't look naturally towards Egypt, which is its competitor for most of the things that it provides. And so that is the way that the future ought to be orientated. In the past, 90% of Gaza's imports and exports went either to Israel, through Israel, or involved Israel in one form or another. Israel has taken deliberate policy decisions to close those doors progressively over the past 10 years, starting with the ending of manual labor going into Gaza, which was previously the largest source of income for Gaza. And it has clearly taken a long-term policy decision to be able to close that door off. I doubt that it will ever be restored again in the near term. But certainly, if that economic integrity of the Palestinian territory is going to be resumed, then we must be looking to the West Bank. We must be looking to forms of investment to allow those businessmen to be able to reestablish those businesses. There is still some money left in Gaza, but most of the businessmen are pretty pessimistic at the moment.
Thank you very much. The speakers, you've been extremely candid. Your comments have been excellent, and I'm sure informed a number of us of your latest insights. Last week, I had a conversation with some of Tony Blair's quartet staff, and I asked them what they foresee, and they were talking about a long-term strategy. I think a number of Israelis and Palestinians are both saying, but what of the short term? Let's continue to think of those things. Also, one final note, both Sarah and Kathy have their most recent books available. They're on sale in the back. And if you were at all intrigued by some of the things they were saying, I'm sure their books would inspire you also. Thank you.
Yesterday, many of the speakers made note of the imbalance between knowledge and understanding between many policymakers and the American people as a whole. Here you have 280 years of empirical exposure, educational experience on the ground of these issues, of people trying to distinguish truth from fiction, facts from falsehood. For the energy panel, please come forward.
On tomorrow's Washington Journal, we'll look at the U.S. middle class with Christian Dorsey of the Economic Policy Institute, former ambassador to the UN, Iraq, and Afghanistan, Zalmay Khalilzad, and